Today on CityCast Chicago, the Sox and the Cubs are struggling this season, but many of us stay devoted to one of them. A lot of Chicagoans are shy to admit they root for both teams. Like our host, Jacoby Cochran. He's not cheering on the Cubbies. But one person who has been up close with fans and players on both sides is Len Kasper. Kasper has been the radio voice of the Sox since 2021, and before that, he was with the Cubs for 16 years. Jacoby talked with Kasper during his first Sox season about the significance of the crosstown rivalry. It's Wednesday, May 10th. I'm Simone Alicea in for Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about.
Len, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling good, Jacoby.
All right, I know you got here in Chicago in 2005. That's the year I graduated 8th grade, but also the year the Sox won the World Series. But you were watching from the north side with the Cubs. What was it like when you first got to Chicago?
Interestingly enough, my wife and I went to Game 2 of the World Series that year, and I got a phone call from Bob Vorwald from WGN, and he said, "Hey, we've got a couple tickets to the game. Would you like to go?" And I remember saying, "Okay, I'm the Cubs announcer. The White Sox are in the World Series. Should I go?" And the answer was yes, of course. There hasn't been a World Series game in Chicago since 1959. Why wouldn't I go, right? So I was in the stands until the final home run by Scott Podsednik.
Podsednik hits one to deep right center field. Back at the wall. This ball is gone.
For arguably the greatest White Sox game in your lifetime, in my lifetime.
And the White Sox win it 7-6.
And I saw it as the new voice of the Cubs, and it was surreal for sure. And I do remember in 05, 06, 07, when the Crosstown series happened, those were very nervous, anxious weekends for me because of the incredible spotlight put on all the broadcasts when the White Sox and Cubs played.
So the tension wasn't just on the field. So it wasn't just between the players or the north and the south side. The broadcasters were in on it too.
Right. So I felt this extra pressure to not only know the Cubs, but to really know the White Sox. And I do remember that first year, just how stressful that was calling Cubs and White Sox. But it was instructive. And, 15, 16 years later, I feel like I finally got my footing.
Was it very competitive, the series between the Sox and the Cubs at the time?
Yes. Yes, it was. It was pretty intense.
Yeah.
And again, 05, 06, as you recall, White Sox were really good.
In 06, it really got heated, y'all, when White Sox base runner A.J. Przinsky barreled into Cubs catcher Michael Barrett, who wanted all the smoke, and punched A.J. square in the jaw.
Bangs onto the plate, and here they go. Podsednik getting into it with Barrett. And now both dugouts empty.
And that really spoke to the intensity of the rivalry.
Like I said at the beginning of the interview, Len, for me, the Sox and Cubs rivalry is so much more than baseball. And the city of Chicago, we're heavily segregated. So that south side, north side feels like it's beyond sports, that it's about city design. It's about segregation. It's about class. Coming into the rivalry, what did you think of it? What were your kind of preconceived notions, and how have you seen it evolve over the years?
I've never contemplated that to the degree that I have now that I've been with both teams. This city is as a lifelong baseball fan, I just thought it was so cool that Chicago had two major league teams. Like most states are happy to have one. And I grew up in Michigan, and the Tigers were the team. I couldn't even contemplate the city of Detroit having two teams in the same league. I will say this. I do remember coming to what is now called Guaranteed Rate Field and walking out, and I was always treated great. Like, I had never had a bad moment with anybody with the White Sox, but I do remember just the vibe in the ballpark walking out of there thinking, wow, White Sox fans really don't like the Cubs. and that was palpable. And then with the White Sox, I've had people come up to me or text me or call me who are lifelong Cubs fans or who work for the Cubs or whatever. And it's like, hey, I root for the White Sox too. It's like they say it under their breath. I've had people around the White Sox say, yeah, like my whole family's Cubs fans, but I can't tell, so like this weird, man, that like you almost have to pick a side publicly. And if you really truly root for both, but you're in any way connected to one, you can't admit that you respect or like the other. And
that's 100% the case. I rarely go into a house, a den, any place that has baseball memorabilia and see both teams represented. One of my best friends, Darius, Cubs fan to the death. My brother, Sox fan. My mom, she's one of those people who's like, I'm happy when both win, but I only go to the Sox games. I'm not going up into Lakeview, right? So you're right. So what do you think that says about Chicago, to the point that that people root for both teams, but they publicly feel like they have to pick a side? That if you say, like me, I'm from the South Side, you probably rarely catch me with a blue and red brim on.
Well, the other one you hear is I'm a North Side Sox fan or I'm a South Side Cubs fan. Like that, that moniker exists. But I would also say, I think there's a very common thread in that if you grew up in a Sox household or grew up in a Cubs household, it's just kind of passed down from generation to generation. I've embraced the idea that there are going to be moments when it feels like the White Sox should get way more attention, and in some cases, way more attention than the Cubs get. But that doesn't happen. And that's just the way it is.
Why?
Because of the Cubs thing, right? They've got the national TV networks all want to, do the Sunday night games with Cubs Cardinals. But there's something kind of really cool about that punk rock kind of attitude of us against the world. And I think that sometimes with the Sox and their fans, they have that vibe. And it doesn't exist with the Cubs. The Cubs thing is a little more similar to the Green Bay Packers and I guess the Dallas Cowboys, even though they haven't been really good, but they're kind of America's team. The Yankees. There's just this glamorous thing that is attached to Cubs baseball, which is really great and really cool. Don't get me wrong, but you're right that it is very, very different. And I've embraced those differences, and I'm absolutely loving. Kind of acknowledging that, I'm going to ask you, if you could realign baseball and put the White Sox and Cubs in the same division, would that be something you would want to see them play 19 times a year and like battle for a division title and maybe meet up in the first round of the playoffs? Or do you like the fact that they're in separate leagues? So some people can kind of root for both. And then if we get the holy grail of the World Series where they meet up, that's the thing you really want. What's your thought?
I personally like the pipe dream. I like that it only happens a couple times a year that they see each other. It gives it a little more tension. I mean, I think a division rivalry would still bring heat every single series, but just always hoping and praying for that day when they just have to travel up and down I-90 to see each other, to play for the chip. I feel like that is a dream worth holding on to, like Cubs waiting for 100+ years. It might not happen in my lifetime, but if it does, that series of games would be so worth it.
You sold me.
It would be so
You sold
worth
me.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of me does think that having a division rivalry would be pretty transcendent and pretty amazing. But I agree with you. I think having that carrot of White Sox Cubs World Series, yeah, that's too good to pass up.
That was Jacoby's conversation with White Sox radio announcer Len Kasper from back in 2021. You can hear Len with the play-by-play during the Sox game tonight in Kansas City. That starts at 6:40, the same time that the Cubs face off against the Cardinals at Wrigley tonight. And some news before we let you go. Mayor Lori Lightfoot has declared a state of emergency in the city because of the growing number of migrants sent from Texas. While the move doesn't provide any more funding, it does allow city officials to spend already set-aside funds without city council approval. Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson's first city council meeting later this month is expected to include a vote to use $51 million on resources for the migrants. Health experts are concerned about a resurgence of monkeypox in the city. Howard Brown Health has seen 8 cases since mid-April and says 6 of them were in people who had been vaccinated. The center is urging affected communities to get vaccinated if they haven't already done so. And some good news, it's Mexico Week. The Mexican Consulate of Chicago is hosting cultural events highlighting the state of Jalisco all week. They've created a Mexican food route that maps out great places to eat, and it all culminates with Mexico Fest this weekend at Navy Pier. If you haven't already, make sure you are signed up for our daily newsletter at chicago.citycast.fm, where we've got even more news and events for you to check out. Thanks so much for listening. Jacoby is back in the host chair tomorrow. We'll talk to you then.